made a huge difference. It was really the beginning of behavior analysis right there. He was a wonderful person. I never saw him be mean or anything. If I went down in the morning and knocked on the door, he would say, "Come in," and he would turn off the light that also controlled a timer to how long he'd been working, and turn his chair around and say, "What can I do for you?" I have so many. It was very difficult to think of what I should say, but I think one of them illustrates two sides of my father, and that is about sailing. When he got appointed at Harvard and we moved to Cambridge, we started spending summers in a little island in Maine called Monhegan Island. It's about 10, 15 miles off the coast of Maine. And it's only about 1.5 miles long. It's a small island. But of course, once you're on an island, you look at all the water and you start thinking about boats. Well, one summer when I was about 13, my father decided it was time that I should learn to sail. So he sent from away. It was the only way you could get anything was to send for it, and it would come by mail boat. He sent away for what is called a foal boat, Folbot. Comes in a couple of packages, and you put it together. Okay. It was essentially a kayak with a rubber bottom and a canvas top, and with a wooden structure to hold it all together. And you sat in the bottom. So it was very low center of gravity. And it came with a sail with what we call a lateen rig, where the sail's attached to a piece of wood rather than to the mast. So you can lower it and raise it pretty easily from inside the kayak. Well, the first thing shows you one part of my father. He's always fixing things. In the back seat, there were 2 seats. And the back seat, which had the tiller for steering the boat, it stuck way out, and it's used all the space. You know, you're sort of sitting there with this big tiller sticking out. So he adjusted it by putting rope around with small pulleys so they could just rest one arm nicely on the corner and go back and forth to steer the boat, just moving the rope. The other thing was that after we sailed for a little bit, of course, he let me take the steering part, and pretty soon I wanted to sail by myself. But there was a problem. The tides in Maine are sometimes up to 6 feet. That's a very high tide, not like the Mediterranean. And so you would have to get your boat from the water's edge all the way up, drag it, or actually we carried it with the 2 of us. It only weighed about 85 pounds, something like that. We'd carry it up way up on the beach where we could fasten it so that it wouldn't get hit by the incoming tides. Well, that was fine when there were 2 of us. I couldn't do it by myself. So my father made a wooden, I don't know what to call it, a V-shaped cradle, so I could put the bow of the boat in there. It had 2 wheels, big wheels, to get on over the sand, and I could pick up the rear and wheel it up to the beach or the other way. So he made it possible for me to sail, and it shows his support of independence in his children. I sailed all over. It was a very large harbor with lots of boats you could run into, but I sailed by myself a lot, or with my dog.
So you guys were sailing people.
Absolutely. I should have worn my sailing. I have a sailing necklace.
Oh, yeah. And something else you'd like to share? So your father was a man who loved the sea, as I can see.
Yes. Well, I have lots and lots of stories. Another one is one time here in Cambridge, I was out walking and it was very hot. And I saw that a sparrowhawk, which is a small hawk, had gotten stuck in some melted tar. So I managed to get him out and bring him home. And my father said, well, we're going to have to get this tar off him. So he started cleaning him, and the sparrowhawk turned around and bit him. And he said, you little devil. And I called him Diabolito from then on. And the extent of my Spanish is about that. Anyway, well, he had to have a place to live. So we had an old ping pong table, very small one, downstairs. My father built a cage around the ping pong table, and with bars for the sparrowhawk and so forth. And we raised him. And then at the end of the summer, we had agreed that he should be let free. So we didn't have a lot of people handling him, really mostly me. In fact, he wouldn't fly to anybody else. But at the end of the summer, we took him to Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is close to here. And there's a place that I used to play called Dell Pond, very deep, with a pond in the bottom of a depression in the cemetery. And so we went down, and I opened the top, and the sparrowhawk flew off, and he never turned around to thank me for all I'd done.
Well, that's sad.
And my father said, that's the best thing. You don't want him to be attracted to females because he has to live on his own. And that made me feel much better.
Well,
the one thing my mother didn't like is he once brought home a live mouse to feed to my sparrowhawk. We let the mouse loose in his cage, but he never caught it. And my mother was always hoping it wasn't a pregnant mouse, because it was now in the house somewhere.
Well, those are interesting anecdotes. Your father was such a handyman. Who was fixing quite a lot of things, as I can see.
He always loved kids, even other people's, but especially, of course, his own and eventually his granddaughter. But he spent a lot of time with us, especially on Mohegan, where he was not going to the office. Mm. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's great. So do you mind if we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay. And what about you? Can you briefly tell us about your journey and career in the behavior field? What would you consider to be your main contributions? Which areas or fields have you been most involved in?
My own career?
Yeah.
Well, I started out teaching third grade in a very fancy girls' school in New York City, and about 2 blocks from the Guggenheim. So it's, in a fancy area.
Yeah.
And I used behavior principles there, of course. And then when I I got married and we went to Pittsburgh, I taught at a blue-collar school west of Pittsburgh, east of Pittsburgh, I don't know. Anyway, and the girls' school had about only 18 students, so there are 30 in the public school in the blue collar neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I love teaching, but I decided that I should go on and get a doctorate. So I did that. And then I taught at West Virginia University for 37 years, mostly teachers and practicing teachers. I spent a lot of time with teachers who were working, and we always did projects. So they had to do some project, and of course they would pick something they wanted to decrease, and the rule was you had to have something to increase, so using behavioral principles. And then after I finally retired and came up here in about 2005, the first thing I did was write a textbook. It was actually my fourth book, but the first one specifically about teaching. And is full of stories about a fourth grader, but that really was one of my students. A lot of them are things that actually happened to me or I did.
Yeah, so you love teaching.
I did. I wanted to continue when we decided we had to come up here to take the house after my parents died. And so I wanted to continue teaching, but West Virginia said you had to come to every faculty meeting, and that was obviously impossible. So they didn't have Zoom then or Google Meet. Too bad. I could have continued teaching. And then I always thought maybe I would teach nursery school or something. But then I got involved in the B.F. Skinner Foundation, and I've really been working with that ever since.
And Julie, what was it like growing up in a family so deeply rooted in the field of behaviorism?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Okay.
Could you repeat, please?
Yes, he means that how was for you?
Oh, okay, I got it.
In a family very based on behaviorism.
Yes, it's interesting. I don't think it was a lot different from a lot of other families with a professional father and a woman who did only volunteer work now and again, except that being behavioral, everybody in the family really used reinforcement as a way of shaping behavior and encouraging and very positive. So I had a very positive upbringing all my life. And my husband says I'm very cheerful. I think that's why.
How would you describe the difference between Skinner as a public intellectual character and as a private person?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding you too clearly.
Well, he means that what would you say is the difference from the private Skinner?
Okay.
And the intellectual character that he's for everyone besides you.
Yes. Well, everybody has different sides to their behavior. And for his public side, he was always very proper. He always wore a tie and wore a suit, and he, stood straight up and everything. And at home, he was a very different person. I mean, I described a couple of things, but there's a video, I think it's still on the bfskinner.org website, but I'm not sure. If not, it's going to go back up soon, of a Christmas when our granddaughter was about 2 or 3. And he got a record of Mahler. In those days, they had records, and he put it on the record player and stood up and started conducting. He messed his hair so he looked like a conductor and started conducting. And I was sitting on the floor pretending to play a cello, and the granddaughter was holding onto my arm trying to help play the cello too. He almost jumped on the couch to do it. I mean, it was very different kind of a person, very different persona.
Yeah, he was like a proper man, an elegant man to the public, but for family he was like this cheerful, funny, and.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was a father, grandfather, husband. My mother was taking the video. It was a home video.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So basically, how in 3 or 4 words, how would you describe your father?
How would I describe my father or his work?
No, your father in general.
I just he was a wonderful person. I never saw him be mean or anything. He loved working in his study in the mornings. And missed that if he was on a trip somewhere. But if I went down in the morning and knocked on the door, he would say, "Come in," and he would turn off the light that also controlled a timer to how long he'd been working, and turn his chair around and say, "What can I do for you?" And would give me as much time as I wanted. And as I said, he loved kids. You always could, anywhere he was going, he always ended up with somebody's kid in his arms.
Surrounded by kids.
Gracias por ver este vídeo, os dejamos por aquí un enlace a nuestra última formación y por aquí algunos vídeos que os pueden resultar de interés. Si estáis buscando ayuda psicológica, también podéis mirar en la descripción del vídeo donde encontraréis nuestra web y podréis solicitar asistencia terapéutica de un profesional confiable y que os ofrecerá ayuda psicológica basada en evidencia científica.